Yes.
Wait, the clock's already rolling.
Oh, it's already rolling.
Oh, wait,
whoa,
hold on.
Hey, we are not in sync. Oh my God. Hi. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming. Kelsey and I run a nonprofit called the Video Game History Foundation, as you all know, because that's literally what's on the screen right now. We are a nonprofit dedicated to making sure that the story of video game history can be told. And I see some of our old merch in the audience. Thank you so much. Our pandemic gift to ourselves was rebranding, so I'm sorry that your merch is now out of date.
Please come by the museum and collect a free sticker for supporting us before the rebrand.
Yeah, come get your free sticker.
Okay, so normally we start with something like this. Why does preserving video game history matter? But
We're at the Portland Retro Gaming Expo.
yeah, I feel like we can skip this part. So a more important question perhaps is, what does preserving video game history mean? Like functionally, what does it mean to preserve video game history?
That means preserving the games, right?
It doesn't mean all of the games, literally all of them. Do we have to have a collection like this full of walls and walls of games? We also have to be able to play them. So that's a lot of hardware to maintain.
Does this look like anyone's house right now? Yeah, okay.
One room.
Just one room of the house, okay?
We have to do arcade games too, so we need like a huge warehouse.
Yeah, we have to preserve every game, right? So this is how we do it.
How about every digital game ever?
Yeah, we have 300 iPhones full of games. No.
Yeah, all of them. No, we haven't even got there yet.
Oh, sorry. That was a sneak.
Yeah. All right, so long story short, we're not doing that.
And to be clear, that is preserving video game history, but like, yeah, that's not how we approach this.
And lots of people already are, thankfully. You know, I think most of you are probably familiar with the concept of emulators and know that a lot of these games can be found online if you are looking for them. So, I mean, this is just sort of a thought experiment we do at the beginning. Like, what do you get out of making sure all of the games are playable? You get some very important things. It's an important part of it. We are never going to argue that. You get, you know, what it looked like, what it sounded like, how it plays. If you're good at it, you can, maybe play through the whole thing. How it was packaged, if it was a retail, physical release of the cover of the manual.
If you are studying the history of a game, this is all important data points, right?
Yeah.
Like that, but that's about as far as you can get with just the game. And is that enough, right? Like we like to think no. That doesn't really tell you who was playing it in its time, why they were playing it, who made it, right? What they were thinking when they made it. How was it sold to people? How was it marketed? Like what did Nintendo think of Super Mario Brothers when they put it out? They obviously didn't know. They didn't know that they had the most gigantic game of all time on their hands, right? Like, but in order to contextualize a game, you need more than just the game.
Yeah.
That. what I just said.
Yeah. We need to understand how they were made and how they were played. So this is sort of what we do at the foundation. Just to quickly kind of define some of these things, like what does it look like to preserve how a game was made? This is things like source code, the actual things that kind of make up, that you build into the actual game itself, the code that was written for it, the art assets that were made for it, the sort of like behind the scenes, like how this all fits together. Original art and documentation. You might have some cool things like email correspondence between people who are like, you should really change this naked lady you put in level 2 for some reason. I don't think that's going to fly.
That was Super Mario Brothers.
That
again.
was, yeah.
Or even just, things that sound really obvious. Like this photograph here, we provided that to a documentary. That is a photograph of the team that made the first Grand Theft Auto. And that's just not a thing that exists in archives. And it's like, because we're so focused on the games, like, okay, yeah, everyone has the first Grand Theft Auto. There's probably 8 copies, on the show floor right now. Probably more than 8. But, we don't know what these people looked like, or even like who worked on the game, because it's not completely credited correctly, or like what their roles were even. And so, that's kind of what we focus on when we're trying to make sure that material exists for people who want to tell the story of how these games were made and why they were made.
And then the other part of it is, we kind of shorthand it to how they were played, which is just, how does this game interact with the rest of the world? So that's, discussion about the game and criticism. That's reviews about the game. When a magazine reviewed a game, a lot of them really didn't like Earthbound, and that had some amount of effect on how that game maybe performed or how people thought about it later, right? Videos and live streams of people playing the game. Twitch Plays Pokemon is one I like to point to a lot. It was just kind of like a big moment in a game that was already quite old, and I don't think Pokemon is ever irrelevant, but that's certainly not a game that everyone's talking about all the time, or should have been in 2014 or whatever that year was. It's speculation and rumors about games, marketing, ads, press releases, promotions, just all the kinds of things that are how did this game exist and affect the rest of the world? So
what I always think about with this stuff, we're trying to elevate the study of games to bare minimum where films are, right? And what I often think about when we're conceptualizing what kind of stuff do we need, what kind of stories do we want to make sure people can tell, I think of the movie Citizen Kane. Citizen Kane, anyone seen Citizen Kane in this room? Yeah, good. A whole bunch,
wow,
great.
That's a lot.
Pretty good movie, right? You watch that movie just on its own, and it's an entertaining movie. It's a fun bit of theater. They're really good crew, good cinematography's amazing, et cetera, et cetera. It's a nice movie. You put in disc 2 of that box set, and it gives you the history of what this movie was. It tells you who the real life person William Randolph Hearst was and what he was about, what a friggin' monster he was, and you start to understand oh my god, this movie was just it was a diss track, against William Randolph Hearst, and it just recontextualizes the whole thing and just makes that movie easily 3 times the movie it was before you knew all of that. And we just think that games are actually in danger of losing the ability for people to be able to tell those stories when they're talking about these games.
Right, because if all you have is the game, in this example, if all you have is the movie, you're just losing a lot of that stuff. So you need access to the kinds of things we're describing in order to actually have the ability to tell those stories. And right now, and it's not their fault, but people are kind of bad video game historians. These are some of my favorite examples.
I'm sorry, we keep using you. Did you know gaming? We love
they're
you.
very good. This is a very old Did you know gaming thing, but Gunpei Koi was not a janitor. He graduated with an electrical mechanics degree, and he was an engineer. So the Jeopardy one is the best one because that actually ran on Jeopardy. That is based off of a
joke Photoshop tweet.
Yeah, a Photoshopped tweet, and it made it onto Jeopardy.
The notion that E.T. is the worst video game ever. It's it was not exactly how Scott Warshaw's book in front. E.T. was not the worst game that month even, right?
Well, that's
That's the later slide.
I forget if we have that in here. We might not, but it was not even the worst game to review that month. That award went to Gorf on the Atari 2600. So there's a very popular video game history book that has some things that are repeated pretty often as fact because and not again people do the best with what they have. But when you don't have access to this actual information, you might put something in there that becomes passed down through generations and is not at all correct.
So I think we need to rethink this notion, right? It seems to that people maybe are bad video game historians. No, we don't see it that way. We think the tools suck, frankly.
Right. All this stuff that we just showed, where would you even go to find the real answers right now? And I'm gonna start with something that should be really easy, which is video game magazines. Because have you guys heard of this concept of libraries? Okay, so there are these really cool places that keep publications, and you can check them out and read them and stuff.
They're free. Support your library.
Yeah, it's really cool, but they don't have video game publications. This is a listing from WorldCat, and it's been a while since I've looked at this slide, so I'm hoping I can remember why I have it here. But this is a really cool magazine, Video Game and Computing Illustrated, or
Video Gaming and Computer Gaming Illustrated.
Computer Gaming Illustrated, thank you.
This magazine, among other things, has an op-ed by Adam West about how video games are art. which is really interesting.
I have these, these locations here. You can see the distance here to the two libraries that have any copies of this magazine.
In the entire country, there are 2 libraries that have copies of what was a fairly popular magazine in the early 80s that has a lot of really interesting information about the state of games in that time period.
And I'm in Seattle, so this is a distance from Seattle, but we're pretty close to here.
Just drive to Michigan State.
Just drive 1,800 miles to Michigan State if you want to look at it.
Where they have 2 issues of the entire run.
And they're not even consecutive.
No, they are not consecutive.
Hey, luckily, in the case of this one, these are on the Internet Archive.
You can go read them for free. For now.
Because so was Replay, which is a really cool point-op trade magazine, and they're not anymore because
the Internet Archive doesn't have the legal rights to digitally reproduce this magazine that is still in publication, that is still sort of defending their copyrights.
Yeah.
So,
and they, again, the Internet Archive, thank God, gets away with a lot, and we're all very thankful for that. But it is.
The point is, it's not a solution, right? Like, it's not a fix-all solution to just pop everything on the internet, because the internet is not necessarily permanent. And our best solution right now for video game magazines is one that, this is not a slight against them. We do the same thing. It's like they get a takedown notice from a copyright holder, they respect it, and poof, that magazine's not on the internet anymore. So not a great solution.
And just to kind of bring it full circle, here's where you can find Replay magazines in the US, and it is also 2,000 miles away. So that's just the magazines. What about all the other stuff we were just talking about? What about concept art and photos of the people who made these games and that sort of thing?
This is anyone familiar with the Starflight games? So this is the original raw material generated, the source code, the design notes, things like that. Like if you're studying Starflight, like this is your primary source is what was coming out of the creator's brain. And that's then again, like we were just talking about magazines, like what about this stuff? Like libraries could not have collected this stuff. This is something that just existed in someone's house that they might not even know anyone is interested in.
So that brings us to the Video Game History Foundation. What the heck are we doing about it? Because hopefully everyone in this room agrees that it's a problem that needs solving. So
I heard 2 yeses,
yeah.
So that's good enough. Yeah.
A couple of people agree. So first and foremost, we're an archive of video game history. We have a physical location in Emeryville, California. We finally have a full-time librarian. Last time, if any of you guys were here for our talk in 2019, we have salaried positions now.
Yeah, in 2019 we were all volunteer. I was full-time volunteer, you were part-time. It's been 3 years. We are now 3 full-time people from nothing. We rule. Thank you. I heard 1 clap. But yeah, I mean, it's exactly what we were talking about. We try to find the material that we know would be necessary to tell the correct stories of video game history, to bring them alive, to understand who made them, etc.
So all of these are from kind of trips to go find and digitize and save this material. 2 of these are in Chicago.
What is that middle one? I don't remember that one.
That is in Mark Flipman's basement.
Ah, okay, yeah. yeah. We fly to people who like produce games, and we're like, what's in your basement? What do you got? Let's dig it out. Let's figure it out. And in a lot of cases it gets donated to us. We get it in the archive. Like in that specific situation, he's like, well, I want to keep that. And we're like, cool. We're gonna go to the library and scan it all and put them online. He's like, yeah, great.
So here's some nice photos of the archive here in case you just want to see it. We're very proud of it. We're very happy that we have this. We did not have this in 2019, so we're very happy. And hopefully you guys all enjoy the Bubsy Shrine. It's video game preservation.
And that poster on the right is from Portland Retro 2018.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone went to our NES exhibit, but we proudly display that in the office. This show's important to us.
So we're saving what still exists. Like Frank said, we are accepting donations, which does happen sometimes, from developers, from people who used to work at magazines, from that sort of thing. We have cleaned out some offices when they've shut down. We are reaching out, trying to actively reach out to developers. Again, pretty small staff, so I know we're not doing it all, but we sure are trying. And we're building an archive for it.
And that's just us. Like, we can't do it all. Like, even within the subset of what we do, you know, collecting development material and information, we cannot handle all of it. No one can.
That's the next slide.
It's the half of this slide.
Sure.
So, you know, we're working with other institutions to sort of make sure they understand how to handle things that they might not be equipped for. I mean, this top bullet point is maybe one of the most important to us, which is that at the foundation we have you know, some game development background. I produced games for a while. I sort of understand the needs of how one handles, you know, video game source code and just the notion of like, oh no, you need like a dev kit to deploy that code to, et cetera, et cetera. I won't bore you, but you know, we're starting to sort of like come up with best practices for how other archives can handle material that is not part of the library science education system. It's for like game development, and we're doing academic research that we publish the results of, oh yeah, fighting the ESA, which is fun.
Yeah. Yeah, we can maybe talk more about that in Q&A, but just for a very, very quick version of it, every 3 years in the United States, you can sort of advocate for further exemptions for libraries and archives to existing copyright laws, because when they were written, there like wasn't this thing called the internet yet, and we lived in a very different world back then. So what does not make sense is requiring libraries and archives to lend out physical copies of things, especially when you have something like, I don't know, a game that only came out on the 3DS eShop.
Yeah,
so
there is no legal path right now for a library to provide access to a digital 3DS game unless they already bought it and it's on a system. That's it.
And they lend out.
And that store's gone now. So there's literally no legal path to providing those games ever.
So yeah, no one can actually do it all. We're trying to get everyone on board. The industry needs to do a better job. You know, academia has some things that they can learn too, and they're helping a lot. Researchers, collectors. I mean, this show there's a lot of video game history that gets unearthed at this show. How many prototypes did you dump yesterday, Frank?
Like about 20.
Okay. We need everyone to kind of preserve and celebrate our history.
And I think that's a unique selling point of us, because Kelsey and I don't have, you know, a traditional like library or archives background. We collectively are like more like amateur historian, archivist, you know, game development and collector community, right? And I think that's unique in our world, right? Because traditional libraries and archives, you know, that's kind of where they're coming from, and they're trying to apply book rules to video games, whereas we're coming from video game world and trying to like force games into like bookshelves, basically.
And now we have a like normal librarian from a real librarian.
Yeah, we finally have
so
some
we can
background.
kind of like smush it all together and it works.
We don't have to make stuff up anymore. We can just do it right.
Yeah, I mentioned I just thought you guys might want to see this. I don't know.
People like prototypes.
This is something we did.
This was one of the, you know, we go on site things, and this was someone who reviewed games in the 80s and 90s, and we're like, hey, can we go dig through your basement? And he's like, sure, and we found these. And he's like, oh, what, those? You know? What, we find 3 unreleased games in there or something?
Yeah. So I mean, that's kind of a unique position we existed in the world, is that we have the availability to kind of seek this stuff out, and then, you know, a lot of times people don't want to do the work themselves. They don't want to like get a kit to dump this stuff, but they are like, sure, yeah, don't take it from me, but if you just want to put it online, sure.
Well, and you know, the thing is, this is another unique part of our story, I think, is that, yeah, there are, you know, video game preservation groups online. I mean, I consider myself a part of that world as well, right? Like people who will happily, if given something like this, will digitize it, will preserve the code, will even put it online, etc. But no one has like funding to do that, you know? And so in this particular case, you know, without funding, all you can do is ask this frankly fairly old man, right, to like go dig through his basement and find things and like, you know, trust it in the mail, or like teach him how to digitize, you know, like the point is that like we are able to use pledged, you know, donation funding to go make it happen, and that's something that I'm really proud of.
And also I think coming from an industry background makes some of those connections a little bit easier too.
Yeah, we know how to talk the language.
That's just a hidden palace, so that's where.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, do you want to talk about that? Or?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, you know, in a lot of cases, like with this stuff, we can't be like this industry-facing friendly charity, but also like pirating ROMs, you know? So in a lot of cases, we just sort of act as like, you know, the middleman. It's like, look, we'll go on site and digitize with everyone's permission, and we sort of contribute to like other projects. Like, hey, if you guys want to distribute this data, go for it.
With permission from the donor.
Yeah.
This was another big project we did. This was like Game Informer's offices. Sometimes I still, forget how much work this was.
Do you see our robots that read 100 discs at a time? It's ridiculous.
So, Game Informer magazine, I assume most of you guys know what that is. They've been around since 1991, and they have basically never moved offices, and they're kind of pack rats because there's space for that in Minneapolis. So they were just kind of throwing everything that they were sent from, you know, the PR departments of all of these companies.
If there's a
throwing
theme,
in a room.
if there's a theme to all of this, is that the Midwest will save us all.
Yes.
And this is another example of what I was just talking about too, right? Where it's like, Kelsey and I went and lived in Minneapolis for 5 weeks to do this. Like we had enough funding and we had saved up, and I didn't pay myself for 3 years. So we were able to, and again, with the industry connection too, right? It's like industry connection and we have funding. So Game Informer magazine reaches out and they're like, look, we have a lot of material. We're scared of, it's not really scared, it's like, we feel responsible for this. like we have, game builds going back to the early 90s and press kits and things like that. And it's like, we don't quite know what we can do with it. We just know that we don't want to be responsible if something happens to this. And so this is a situation where it's like, we can't take that information and put it on the internet. They don't want to be rid of it. It's their collection. But that data needs to be saved because if there's a fire, like if the magazine shuts down and there's just a lock on the door and GameStop corporate just like destroys everything that's in the closet because they don't know what it is, had to be saved no matter what. So we're in a position, thankfully, due to funding, that we can just go on site and like digitize things for over a month and just be like, look, we'll figure it out later. The data's safe. Like we'll figure out the logistics of how people can access it. That's a future problem. We just want to run triage right now and make sure that things aren't dying. And thank God we did, because some of those discs were dead. I mean, like time claims us all. And CDR, burnable CDs is not a permanent media, and some of those discs were, delaminating and were dead. Don't worry, it was like, builds of like Madden 2001 or something. Like it was not, we didn't lose anything there that broke my heart.
Yeah.
But it's happening, and it's important that we do what we can while we can.
You should also talk about this one.
I guess that is my face.
Yeah,
huh?
that is your face.
So another thing we do is sort of try to tie together this notion of material and people to get stories down while we can. This is my favorite game of all time, The Secret of Monkey Island. Anyone familiar with Monkey Island? Great. So, we talked earlier about source code without, that's just the raw, those are the files that are actually on everyone's computers when they're building the game. It's not what's on the disk, it's not what's shipped. And I was fortunate enough, I don't know, it's like life highlight, I don't know how to top this, but we were given access to the source material for The Secret of Monkey Island and Monkey Island 2. The actual files and stuff. We were given access to Ron Gilbert, that's the creator there, his notebooks to kind of see what he was thinking, and we were given access to Ron himself, and we had this virtual event where I actually went through the source code and found like that room there is not in the final game, but it was in the source, and we rebuilt it and we showed how it would have worked, and we were able to talk about how it worked. And what you're seeing in the upper left is I learned Ron's scripting language for it's called Scum for his adventure games, and we were able to show in real time how people literally made this game. Like we scripted something new in real time and kind of showed how the tools worked and how you build it and how instantly it would be in the game. And we were able to show like their animation tools and how that worked and how artists were able to make it. And you know, the result was this, I don't know, 2-hour-ish stream where, you know, people who've been fans of this game for 30 years learned a ton that they didn't really, they might have known, like, you know what I mean? Like they might have been able to conceptualize from interviews and stuff how these games were made, but because we had the actual stuff, we were able to actually show it in real time, and it helped you really understand not just how the games were made, but in this particular case, the soul of this game is how quickly one could script like a joke in that game and like instantly see it on screen. And it kind of helped you understand like where the humor of that game came from. It was just people throwing jokes at the wall and letting them stick, and it's something that doesn't happen without that sort of unique position we're in, right? Where we have this sort of industry and developer background, and we're collecting material, and so we tie it all together and educate.
And you should go watch that if you have any interest in either kind of behind the scenes video game development or Secret of Monkey Island, or both. It's on our website and YouTube. But yeah, I mean, that's us, but we really do believe that everyone has a role in this. It really is an ecosystem that kind of requires everyone to be on board. Not just historians like us, not just like institutions and that sort of thing, but you know, the companies and the creators themselves, the people who play the games and just want to learn more about them, and students and collectors are a big part of it too. So really everyone has kind of a role to contribute into the total mass of stuff that is required to truly preserve video game history.
You know, and I want to pause on this for a minute, like, because we're at this show, right? We think collectors play a big part in this ecosystem. You know, even just owning things privately is still a form of preservation. And I mean, we talked that we opened this panel by talking about how we don't collect video games. We just straight up don't at the foundation. And you know, oftentimes collectors will talk to us and be like, look, I have this stuff, I'm not really sure what to do. And we're like, look, are you in danger of losing your mortgage? You know, no, you're good. Like, stuff feels safe right now. You know, we're not in a massive rush to make sure that like your stuff lives somewhere else. Like, but even beyond that, like the collector world is like, trying to think of how to phrase this, the first line in actually documenting video game history, right? Like we wouldn't have known about a lot of games and variations and weird quirks and things like that if not for collectors and players.
Right, box variants are part of the marketing story, you know, part of the like how a game was sold story. Like those are part of, and that's something that collectors pay attention to that maybe a traditional historian or a library or something wouldn't. They'd just be like, okay, we have Super Mario Brothers. It's like, well, okay, there were like
you have the matte sticker, you have the glossy sticker, you know? You have the white oval. Which one do you have? Yeah.
Anyways, let's talk. Let's do some questions, and please feel free to reach out to us. And also, we run the museum here at this show, the pop-up museum, which is just like around the corner. I kind of wish they put us in the other auditorium, so it was like
right next door, yeah.
But we're gonna be there the rest of the day, so we'll do some questions now. But if you don't get yours answered, feel free to come hunt us down.
Let's line up at the mic because they're recording this, and I want to make sure they record the audio.
I can ask a question?
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask about, like in the news, there was some, like a month ago, there was a leak for like Grand Theft Auto 6, or who knows what that game will be called. What is the ethics behind like going and scouring the internet for any sort of like source code or screenshots for games that have got leaked by the industry that they don't want you to have? What do you guys do in those situations?
You're opening with a hard one.
This is not the first time we will use the phrase personal ethics this weekend when ask questions.
Yeah.
Like institutionally, like what do? We ignore it. Like that's too hot for us. Like There's a common sense line, right, where it's, I don't know, someone sends us source code for a Mac game from the 90s that no one's selling anymore. It's like, and it was stolen, right? It's like, okay, we'll take that. But you know, I think the answer for us is there's a line somewhere. It's definitely not on the side of an unreleased Grand Theft Auto game that they're about to sell, or like the Nintendo Giga Leak, you know, that was like an online security breach recently. But
Well, and I'll say two additional things about this. One, it's important for us that we have some level of trust with the industry,
Yep.
because we want to open up this in a very like normalized and happy and legal way where companies are just simply more comfortable sharing this stuff, and I think that kind of jeopardizes that entire conversation. And number two, tons of people already downloaded it. So if they do decide to, I mean, they won't do this, but if they decided to just destroy the entire game and it was never going to be seen again, that would be a conversation for later. Lots of people have those files, and that could be a later ethics question, but an immediate ethics question, you know, I mean, we have to be a little more, I don't know, above the board.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
And I do want to, that it makes an interesting point that didn't quite make it in here, which is another part of this. You know, we're talking about the source code for Monkey Island. Source code for the industry is very like, it's a trade secret. You know, they don't want you cloning their games. Part of this exercise was also slowly getting the industry to warm up to it not being scary for researchers to have access to material. So, I mean, that's Lucasfilm, that's the Star Wars people, and that's something where it's like, you know, we worked with them before we did the event to let them know what was happening, and the end result, I think, was very positive for them, and I think that that's a way that we can contribute toward game preservation in the way that we kind of uniquely can, which is getting people to sort of warm up to this future we want to see, where Lucasfilm's just straight up donating their archive to an archive. Does that answer your question?
Oh, definitely, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, hi, thanks so much for everything you guys do. I think
Thank you.
You're doing some great work. My question is about new media preservation and rights management. I worked for many years in new media. I was writing for websites that no longer exist, working on YouTube channels that no longer exist. It is often a huge challenge when working in forms of media that are more recent and not as well defined legally, to preserve some of this material. My question to you is, what avenues currently exist legally for game preservation, especially as it's a more recent form of media than many of our copyright laws? What avenues do you pursue currently, and if you could sort of write laws or advocate or lobby for changes in the future, what kind of things would you look to change?
That's such a good segue into something we said we'd talk about later. I think that I started this thing 6 years ago. Does that sound right?
Sure.
Sure, 6 years of the VGHF, why not?
Yes.
And I think a lot of this past 6 years is sort of recognizing what our limits are. Like, we can't do everything. And something that, you know, maybe took me like 2 or 3 years was realizing that we can't solve the preservation of digital games yet on our own. So that's part of the answer to your question. But the sort of like, what are the even theoretical avenues, right? I think that's maybe the only way we can answer this, because there's not really a clear path yet. Do you want to talk about the ESA thing?
Yeah, I mean, a thing that we are, a very good first step we are trying to take with this is, you know, I mentioned earlier that right now the way the library system works is, you know, you might have to, if you want a eShop 3DS game, as a library you have to have a copy, you know, a copy of that game already downloaded and on a 3DS that you maintain.
And people have to come in and touch your 3DS.
Physically check out, and you have to like repair it and everything when it goes, you know, so that's just really unreasonable. So a very good first thing we are doing is advocating during this next round of DMCA hearings for allowing libraries and archives to start distributing things digitally in the exact same way they already do with ebooks, with movies. Like, this is a thing that happens.
Yeah.
It's just not there with games yet. And right now we have a study that we are doing with the Software Preservation Network to kind of prove, when these hearings go up, how impossible it is to access most of these games in a legal setting. I don't have I mean, we're still working on it, but...
Yeah, we're doing a study, but we're trying to show that, like, no, like, all games are out of print.
Yeah, I mean, essentially
Yeah.
with the thousands of games we are using as sort of our like sample study, which is every Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance game. I think we did all PS2 games maybe, or something like that.
I mean, we don't
And
have
then-
full data yet, but...
Well, yeah, but then it's a random sampling of like 1,000 or 2,000 other games. I can't remember the exact specifications of the study, but the point is, it's, you know, a huge sample size of just older video games. My guess is the answer is going to be like, you can still legally get like 3% of them. And obviously you can buy used copies of things, but like that's not what the ESA, who is the sort of the other side of this, the commercial advocate for it, is trying to say. They're trying to say that, you know, the money still goes to the IP holders, and that's just not the case for, I believe, about 97% of the games out there. So that is a good first step. If we can get that exemption, that opens the door to further exemptions that can explore things like assets and source code and that sort of thing. But we kind of have to take the ESA down a peg first, unfortunately. So
Because their position, when you know, I don't want to get into like the Digital Millennium Copyright Act and the exemption rules and all that, but essentially every 3 years, like you said, institutions can apply for softening of the rules, and the ESA's argument against libraries being able to provide remote access to video games is that most video game companies keep their games in print. So we're trying to establish, first of all, that no,
that's not even close
crazy,
to true.
and then kind of go from there. To be clear, like there is already a bit of softening, and that something like this was in the last round attempted, and the result is very weird, which is that libraries can now legally give remote access to software, but not games.
If you're wondering what the difference between games and software are,
Shrug.
we are too. Is it if it's fun?
Yeah,
Are you
game
having
has not
fun?
been legally defined in this context, but sorry we don't have a clean answer to your question, but it's a really good question.
Yeah, and we have a good start, and then just to quickly, the first part of your question was like, what is the legal path right now? And it's like, you have to have permission from the IP holder completely, basically, in order to like fully share it.
And there's also a notion of things can be donated to the library by someone who's not the copyright holder, and people can access it on site at that point. But that is not sustainable and not the way that reality works when it comes to studying video game history. It's done on the internet.
Thank you. I hope Mario Teaches Typing is neither a game
We do have the source code for Mario Teaches Typing.
Oh,
Yes. Yes.
I love the work that you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So in this case that you're going around people's basements and rummaging through all their stuff,
Yeah.
which is super cool.
Best part of the job is rummaging.
Have there been any cases where people have said that they don't want you to scan or preserve these things? And what are some of the reasons behind that, and how do you react to that situation?
Personal information being
Yeah.
really, like, I mean, that, and we do that too. Like, I'm, you know, some of this stuff that we've been going through, there's like Mark Trammell's personal phone number on one of the documents, and it's like, I probably shouldn't
Yeah.
let the whole world have his personal phone number. That's probably not ethically correct there.
But I think the question was more about resistance too,
Sure.
right? In our experience, well, it's a tough one to answer. Like we'll go back to that Game Informer trip as an example. I'm not going to call it resistance, but it was like, look, we're a magazine that still publishes, and we work with the publishers that send us things. We can't like ruin relationships. So it's not resistance, like we don't want anyone to get at it. It's more just like, in that case, it's like, let's slow down and figure this out over the years, right?
Save it first,
right.
and then let's talk about it and figure out how we can, make it done safely.
But in terms of like the sort of basement rummaging aspect of it's almost like in order to get to the point where someone invites you in their house, it's almost like they're already on board. You know what I mean? I think the resistance that we've found, and this is kind of interesting, is in more than one case, someone's been like, yeah, come take it all. And then we come and take it all, and they're like, I miss it. You know, I'm gonna have it back. So, I mean, that's probably the closest form of resistance from sort of that community. One level of resistance I'd like to sort of start dismantling more is the idea of data from games existing on the internet diminishing the financial value in the collector's world. It's sometimes kind of true, but usually not, and that's something that I'd like to sort of see less resistance of, but we're getting there.
That was a very thorough answer, thank you.
Yeah, we ramble.
Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering, as someone who's interested in getting into this field of game preservation and history, do you have any recommendations or suggestions on looking for those kinds of jobs or career paths?
Oh, there aren't jobs.
Did you miss the part where I said I didn't pay myself for 3 years? Because I didn't pay myself for 3 years.
Okay, well, no, let me reframe that a little bit more. There are starting to be, especially at like individual companies, there are very, like, kind of just now started to be archivist jobs there.
And two kinds, right?
Yeah.
Two kinds. There's like sort of lore archivists, right? Like make sure that we're not messing up the Halo story is a job, you know, and then
and then there's like actual archivists. So like the Pokemon company just hired a full-time archivist, and I know a lot of the bigger studios like EA and Bungie and that sort of thing, like they are starting to have an archivist. My caution to you is basically just like there's like probably 10 or 15 total jobs out there right now. Hopefully that gets way better. People are starting to pay attention. Those are largely like capital A archivist work, so that's a library science degree kind of thing, and my guess is probably like a real interest in the subject and a show that you work, like when you're doing your master's thesis or whatever, it's like I worked on a video game thing in my, for that. But yeah, right now, it's a really tiny field and we kind of invented our jobs.
Well, I would also say just in general, like the sort of library and archive world, I think collecting game-related material is just inevitable for most archives at this point.
Yeah,
especially university archives, like almost all of the major ones have some kind of video game archive at this point. So, if we're talking career path, that it might be just kind of like target universities that deal in new media and things like that, and start being the change you want to see from within. I think would be the best answer to that. I do want to answer also from the perspective of not a career, just like how do I help? And what we often tell people is just find your niche. Just find your niche and go for it. Like whether that's games made in my town, you know what I mean? Like just find that corner that no one's tackling yet and just do it, because you can't just be like video game history, all of it,
It's like saying book history,
right.
It's just like there's a lot of it, and it's a lot easier to specialize, and I think that's an easier way to, I think it's the best way to be effective, too,
right.
is to kind of specialize.
And it's how we all got our start. I'm the unreleased NES games. You're the weird accessories person, So like.
Well, and we talk too. So I mean, if you become the Game Gear person or something, like you bet someone's going to hit you up when something Game Gear that we don't know how to handle comes.
That's Omar Corna. That one's done, but not that one. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much.
Maybe one or two more, unfortunately, unless it's lightning round. Let's find out.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm a really big fan of your stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was wondering, are you worried about the future of preserving current video? Yeah.
Kelsey's just worried in general
I'm
most
a very
of the time.
anxious person.
Yeah. So I was just asking, I know you heard that like Google Stadia has like recently shut down and stuff, and like it's kind of worrying to see that like maybe sometime in the future like the companies are still pushing like cloud gaming and stuff, and I know that like it's gonna be like a massive like nightmare in terms of preservation, and I was wondering about like your thoughts on that.
Okay, I'm going to try to answer this the fastest I've ever answered this. The short answer is yes, it's terrifying. It keeps me up at night. Answer number 2, we know we can't save all of it, but the real answer actually is I like to try to I want people to rethink a little bit what we think of as game preservation.
Yeah.
We are absolutely going to lose some like builds of things, some, you know, the 14th day of the new Destiny update rather than the 20th day of the Destiny update. Like we're absolutely losing a lot of that stuff. And I think the sooner we come to terms with some of that stuff, the sooner that we can have a plan of action that is still pretty effective, which is, think about this from how someone 50 years from now is going to truly need to interact with this game and access it in the future. So if you plop someone in 50 years from now down in an empty World of Warcraft, like an empty Azeroth, are they really playing World of Warcraft? Probably not.
They're seeing a corpse of it, but they're not. There's no contextualizing like what this game actually was. There's no knowing what the community was, etc. And
What
yes,
is far more effective for a historian studying World of Warcraft 50 years from now is the Leroy Jenkins video. That's the kind of thing that it's going to teach you, like what World of Warcraft was and what a cultural effect it had on people and like how this game was played and how people were interacting with it. So I think the future of some of this stuff is going to be focusing more on making sure we are archiving things like playthroughs of things, commentary, live streams, YouTube videos made about like an experience in the game or blog posts or something like that.
even just oral history. Like, tell me about your experience playing World of Warcraft. Let's interview you as a citizen of Azeroth. Yeah.
That's a great point, because like even like Blizzard's own like official method to like play the original World of Warcraft, like it doesn't like recreate it completely.
Right.
There's still like stuff that they changed for like.
And it's also
life
just not
quality.
the early 2000s again. Like it's not going to feel exactly the same because you're not like 12 years old and it's after school and you're eating Cheetos and you're playing with your friends. That's.
I think the shortest version of this is we just have to recognize that entropy is reality, that things will die, and we should be running triage instead of panicking about doing it perfect. We are a little bit over time, so we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Thanks for the questions. And we are heading right back to the museum, which is the next hall over. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Oh no, that's what I was going to say. So thank you so much, and feel free to follow us over there if you have more questions. I probably have to go to the bathroom first, but other than that.
Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and to the right are the playlist of the Portland Retro 2022 and some other interesting videos. Thank you.